Part 1. The beginning growing up. I always felt like a stranger in my own home. My name is Caleb, and I was adopted when I was 6 years old. I don't remember much about my life before that, just flashes of crowded foster homes, the faces of social workers, and the constant sense of waiting for something or someone to take me away. When James and Linda came into my life, I thought my prayers had been answered. James was tall and broad-shouldered, with a booming laugh and a carpenter's hands. Linda was softer, with kind eyes and a voice that could calm storms. They seemed perfect, and I believed they wanted me to be part of their family. Their house was the kind of place I'd only seen in movies: a big yard, a porch swing, and a little white picket fence. But what really excited me was the thought of having a sibling. Emily, their biological daughter, was a year younger than me. She had bright blonde hair, freckles that dotted her nose like constellations, and the kind of confidence I envied. I remember our first meeting vividly. I had just stepped into the house, clutching my tattered backpack, when she appeared at the top of the staircase. "Who's that?" she asked, her voice dripping with curiosity. "This is Caleb," Linda said warmly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "He's going to be your new big brother." Emily tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made me squirm. "He doesn't look like us." Her words stung, though I didn't fully understand why at the time. James laughed it off, ruffling my hair and saying, "Well, now we're one big, happy family." I wanted to believe that. Part 2. The blame game. It didn't take long for me to realize that Emily didn't want a brother. At first, it was subtle. She'd ignore me at dinner, refuse to share her toys, or roll her eyes whenever I tried to talk to her. But as we got older, her hostility became impossible to ignore. Emily had a talent for bending the truth to suit her needs. If she spilled milk at the breakfast table, she'd point a finger at me before the glass even hit the floor. If one of her dolls went missing, she'd march up to our parents and tell them she saw me take it. It didn't matter that I was innocent. Emily had a way of convincing people, especially our parents. James and Linda adored Emily. She was their golden child, their pride and joy. When she lied about me, they believed her without question. Linda would shake her head, muttering about how I needed to behave better. James, on the other hand, was less forgiving. I remember one day vividly. Emily had drawn on the living room wall with a marker a big, looping flower in bright green. When James saw it, he demanded to know who was responsible. Before I could open my mouth, Emily pointed at me. "Caleb did it," she said, her voice steady and sure. I tried to protest, but James didn't want to hear it. He grabbed me by the arm, marched me upstairs, and punished me with his belt. I was only 8 years old. Afterward, as I sat on my bed, my legs burning with fresh welts, Emily peeked into my room. She smiled. "You shouldn't have done that," she said mockingly. That smile haunted me for years. Part 3. The Weight of Unfairness. By the time I was 13, life at home had become a battle I couldn't win. Every day felt like walking through a field of traps that only I could set off. I learned quickly that no matter what I did, Emily had a way of twisting the truth to make me look like the villain. And the worst part? She didn't even have to try very hard. Emily's lies started small, accusing me of stealing snacks from the kitchen or blaming me when her toys went missing. But as we grew older, her schemes became more calculated, more vicious. If she got a bad grade on a test, she'd claim I distracted her while she was studying. If she skipped her chores, she'd say I bullied her into doing mine instead. "She's your little sister, Caleb," Linda would say, her tone heavy with disappointment. "You're supposed to set a good example." I wanted to scream. How could I set an example when no one believed me? One Saturday morning, things reached a boiling point. Emily had spilled red nail polish on the carpet in the living room. I wasn't even home when it happened. I'd been out mowing the neighbor's lawn to earn some extra cash. But when I walked through the door, Dad was already waiting for me, his face like a thundercloud. "Do you think we're made of money?" he snapped, holding up the ruined piece of carpet. "I didn't do it," I said firmly, keeping my eyes on the ground. I had learned not to look him in the eye when he was angry. It only made things worse. Don't lie to me, he roared. Emily saw you playing with that polish yesterday. I told you to leave her things alone. Emily was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and a smug look on her face. She didn't even try to hide her satisfaction. I didn't touch it, I said again, my voice shaking. But it didn't matter. The belt came out, and I braced myself for the sting of leather against my skin. After it was over, I limped back to my room and shut the door, the weight of injustice pressing down on my chest like a stone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Why did Emily hate me so much? Why couldn't my parents see through her lies? I thought about running away, but where would I go? I had no one. The next morning, Emily came into my room. She didn't even knock. You should have just taken the blame, she said, leaning against the doorframe. It's easier that way. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to yell at her. Why do you do this? I asked. What did I ever do to you? She tilted her head, pretending to think. You exist, she said simply, and then she left. Those two words haunted me. They made me realize that no matter how hard I tried, I would never be enough for my family. I was the outsider, the spare part that didn't fit. At school, I found some solace. My teachers praised my intelligence, and I excelled in subjects like math and science. Numbers made sense to me in a way that people didn't. They were logical, predictable. If I worked hard, I got results. But even school couldn't completely shield me from the pain of home. I'd come back every afternoon to Emily's smirks and my parents' cold indifference. They rarely asked about my day, and when they did, it felt like an obligation rather than genuine interest. One evening, Emily took things to a whole new level. She broke a glass vase in the living room, a family heirloom that had belonged to my grandmother. When my parents heard the crash, they came running, their faces pale with shock. Caleb did it, Emily said immediately, her voice filled with fake panic. I wasn't even in the same room. I had been upstairs doing my homework, but that didn't stop my dad from dragging me downstairs and demanding an explanation. I didn't do it. I shouted, my frustration boiling over. Why do you always believe her? She's lying. Watch your tone, Dad growled, his hand tightening on my arm. You've been nothing but trouble since the day we brought you into this house. Those words cut deeper than any belt ever could. They confirmed what I had always feared, I wasn't really part of this family. I was a burden, a mistake. That night, I sat in the dark, my heart heavy with anger and sadness. I promised myself that one day, I would prove them all wrong. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to rise above their cruelty. And I would do it on my own. Part 4, The Catalyst. The breaking point came when I turned 16. By then, I had grown taller and stronger, but inside, I still felt like that lost 6-year-old clutching a tattered backpack. Emily's lies had only grown more elaborate, and my parents' punishments harsher. The pattern was suffocating. That summer, James took on a big renovation project in the backyard, building a pergola. I offered to help, hoping it would be a chance to connect with him. For once, he agreed. Working with wood reminded me of my foster days, fixing broken fences or building makeshift shelves to keep busy. It was comforting, almost meditative. One afternoon, while sanding a plank, I noticed Emily lurking nearby. She had that mischievous glint in her eyes. Before I could say anything, she ran into the garage where Dad kept his tools. Moments later, I heard her scream. Dad came running, and there was Emily clutching her arm, fake tears streaming down her face. He pushed me, she sobbed. He pushed me into the workbench. The lie was absurd, but Dad didn't even look at me for an explanation. Go inside, he barked. We'll deal with this later. I went to my room, trembling with frustration. I had done nothing, and yet I knew the punishment would come. I wanted to scream, to fight, to make them see the truth, but what was the point? That night, something changed in me. As I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, the familiar weight of unfairness pressing down on my chest, a thought took root in my mind: I needed to leave. not run away in anger, but leave on my own terms. I would finish high school, save every penny I earned from mowing lawns and odd jobs, and get out the second I turned 18. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Part 5: The Escape Plan. The next 2 years were a blur of quiet determination. I avoided Emily as much as I could, and when I couldn't, I swallowed my pride and let her win. Every time she smeared my name, every time she turned a minor mishap into a major scandal, I bit my tongue and let it slide. Arguing with her was like punching smoke, it only made things worse. Instead, I threw myself into my studies. Numbers became my sanctuary, and math my escape. Unlike people, equations always made sense. If I worked hard, I got results. At school, I was the quiet kid who stayed late to help the teacher clean up, the one who finished his tests early and aced every assignment. My teachers noticed. One afternoon, my calculus teacher, Mr. Simmons, pulled me aside after class. He was a wiry man with a salt and pepper beard and a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room when he talked to you. "Caleb," he said, pushing his glasses up his nose, "have you thought about applying to universities?" I laughed, the sound bitter in my throat. "I can't afford college." Mr. Simmons frowned, leaning against his desk. "You ever hear of scholarships?" "Sure, but they're for kids who are special." "I'm just." "You're one of the smartest students I've taught in 20 years, he interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't sell yourself short." Here, he scribbled something on a piece of paper and handed it to me. "Look into this program. They're looking for students like you." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the flyer. It was for a scholarship that offered a full ride to underprivileged students. The requirements were steep, stellar grades, a glowing recommendation, and an essay that explained why you deserved the opportunity. Could I do it? Did I deserve it? I didn't know, but the thought of a way out lit a fire in me. I decided I'd try. At home, things remained tense. Emily hadn't slowed down her antics. In fact, her lies grew more elaborate as she realized I no longer fought back. If she got a bad grade, she'd say I distracted her while she was studying. If she didn't clean her room, she'd claim I bullied her into doing my chores instead. Somehow, she always came out looking like the victim, while I was painted as the troublemaker. "She's your little sister, Caleb," Linda would say, her tone heavy with disappointment. "You're supposed to set a good example." I stopped arguing. What was the point? Every accusation, every punishment only strengthened my resolve to leave. I started working every odd job I could find, mowing lawns, babysitting, cleaning out gutters. I didn't care how hard or dirty the work was, every dollar went into a shoebox hidden under a loose floorboard in my room. I counted the money obsessively, the growing stack of bills a tangible reminder that freedom was within reach. At school, I worked on my scholarship application in secret. Mr. Simmons helped me polish my essay, his encouragement keeping me motivated even when I doubted myself. He believed in me in a way no one else ever had. One day, as I was walking home from school, I noticed Emily standing by the front door with that all-too-familiar smirk on her face. My stomach sank. "What now?" I muttered under my breath. When I walked inside, I found Linda waiting in the kitchen, her arms crossed. On the counter sat an empty shoebox, the one I'd hidden under my floorboard. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice sharp. I froze, my heart pounding. "Where did you find that?" "Emily said you've been hiding money," Linda said, her eyes narrowing. "What were you planning to do with it?" "It's for college," I said quickly. "I've been saving for." "Don't lie to me, Caleb." Linda snapped. "Emily said you've been stealing from us." I whipped my head toward Emily, who was standing in the doorway, her arms crossed and a look of triumph on her face. "What? I didn't steal anything." "Then how do you explain this?" Linda asked, shaking the shoebox. "I earned it," I shouted, my frustration boiling over. "Every cent of that money came from jobs I worked after school." "Emily's lying." But as always, my words fell on deaf ears. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My shoebox was gone, confiscated by my parents who believed Emily's lies without question. I felt empty, defeated. But beneath the despair, a new emotion bubbled up: anger. Not the fleeting kind of anger that flared and faded, but something deeper, colder, a determination to take back control of my life. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't keep fighting a battle I would never win. The next day, I stayed late after school to talk to Mr. Simmons. "I need to get out of here," I said, my voice trembling with urgency. "What do I have to do to make that scholarship happen?" Mr. Simmons looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Let's make it happen." For the next few weeks, I worked harder than I ever had in my life. I revised my essay until it was perfect, collected letters of recommendation from my teachers, and submitted my application just before the deadline. When the acceptance letter finally arrived, I couldn't believe it. I had done it. I was going to college on a full scholarship. That night, as I packed a small bag with my few belongings, I wrote a note to James and Linda: "Thank you for taking me in, but I can't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll be okay." At midnight, I slipped out of the house and didn't look back. The world ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it was mine to shape. Part 6: The Final Betrayal. A week before I turned 18, I came home to find my room in shambles. My mattress was flipped, drawers emptied, and my savings box lay open on the floor, empty. Emily stood in the doorway, smirking. "Looking for something?" she taunted, dangling a wad of cash in her hand. "Give it back," I said, my voice low and steady, though my hands were shaking. "Why? It's not like you earned it. You've just been mooching off us this whole time." I lunged at her, but she darted out of the way, laughing. "Mom and Dad already know about your little stash. They said it's going toward my new phone. Guess you'll have to work a bit harder if you want to escape." Her words hit like a sledgehammer. All my hard work, gone in an instant. For a moment, despair threatened to consume me. But then, something inside me snapped. "Enjoy it while you can," I said, my voice cold. "Because one day, you'll have to face the truth. And I won't be here to save you." That night, I packed a small bag with what little I had left, a few clothes, my school books, and the address for a homeless shelter I had looked up months ago, just in case. I wrote a note for James and Linda: "Thank you for taking me in, but I can't stay where I'm not wanted. I'll be okay." Then I left. Part 7: Freedom. Walking away from that house was both terrifying and exhilarating. The shelter wasn't far, and the staff there were kind. They helped me apply for jobs and even supported my college application. I didn't tell them much about my past, but they didn't press. Months later, I got the letter: I had been accepted into the program Mr. Simmons recommended. Full tuition, room, and board. For the first time, my future felt like it belonged to me. Leaving for college was bittersweet. Part of me wished James and Linda had cared enough to stop me, but they didn't even call. Emily? She probably celebrated my absence. Years passed. I thrived in college, majoring in engineering and landing a great internship. The life I built was far from perfect, but it was mine. One day, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Emily. Her voice was shaky, and she sounded nothing like the confident girl who had tormented me. "Caleb," she said, "I need your help." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to hang up, to let her deal with her problems the way she had forced me to deal with mine. But another part of me, the part that still yearned for family, for connection, listened. "Tell me what's going on," I said cautiously. Her next words shook me to my core: "It's Mom and Dad. They're gone. And I don't know what to do." And just like that, the past came rushing back, demanding to be faced.